Mary set out. These are perhaps the three most emblematic words of what it means to have faith. Mary set out. Mary received a revelation of God, and her first response was to set out from her land. Just as the Magi and the shepherds received a revelation of God, and their first response was to set out from their land. So this is a sign when a soul has been truly touched by God. They set out to new lands to find him. The other day, someone asked me the question. They told me, they said I shouldn't celebrate a Mass at midnight on Christmas because it's inconvenient. It doesn't make sense to have to come to church in the middle of the night. Tell me about it. There's no other night you will ever find me up at 12 o'clock just hanging around. But it actually really made me ask myself, why am I going to offer a midnight Mass? It's true. It's illogical, it's inconvenient, and it's very uncomfortable. So why do it? And the first thought that came back to me was, so was the birth of Jesus Christ in a cave. So was the journey of Mary to Bethlehem when she was 9 months pregnant. So was the journey of the Magi and the shepherds. Everything that we're celebrating about Christmas is for people who set out on a journey to encounter God, a journey that was uncomfortable, inconvenient, and somewhat illogical. G.K. Chesterton once said, "Let your religion be less of a theory and more of a love affair." Why? Because only lovers know how to be inconvenienced and uncomfortable for the sake of their love. It's so hard for us to imagine coming to church one night out of the year at midnight. But when you were young and in love, how many times did you spend all night with the person you love, just talking, just trying to be together? How many times have you traveled hundreds of miles, hours upon hours, just to have a weekend with the person that you love? Why is it any different with God? One night out of the year. At what point did our faith become relegated to a theory? God being born in a cave in the middle of the night, a theory. God dying on a cross to save us from our sins, a theory. God coming to us in the Holy Eucharist, a theory. At what point did our faith become more of a theory and less of a love affair? Because it's true. In theory, a midnight Mass is illogical. In theory, waking your children up to come to church in the middle of the night is illogical. In theory, disrupting your sleep cycle when you have your whole family and the food and the parties to prep for, to come and celebrate the birth of Christ while the rest of the world is asleep, is illogical. But so is setting out to visit your cousin after God just became incarnate in your womb. So is setting out hundreds of miles to follow a star that proclaims the birth of the King of Kings. So is setting out from your sheep in the middle of the night to seek a baby laying in a manger. So is God setting out from heaven to assume our human nature so that he can have it crucified on a cross to save us from our sins. It's illogical, it's inconvenient, and it's definitely uncomfortable. Why did God do it? Because to God, your relationship with him is not a theory. It's a love affair. And it's in that very place of illogical inconvenience when we too set out to meet the God who sets out to meet us, where our faith becomes less of a theory and more of a love affair. But we only realize that when we set out. If you think about it, God to me, the principal thing that God is to me is the one who called me to be a priest. I never knew God the way He is until I set out on that journey to follow Him. It's the journey that reveals the relationship. Just like when you got married, you did not know your spouse the way you know them now when the day you said yes. That was the setting out. The rest of your life has revealed them to you. We only realize who God is when we set out. And without that setting out, our faith atrophies, just like a muscle. If it's not worked, if it's not stretched, if it's not broken down so that it can rebuild, what happens to it? Atrophies. It dies. So our relationship with God atrophies if we stop stretching it, if we stop being willing to be uncomfortable for the one we love. That's when our faith becomes relegated to mere reason in the mind, and it loses its flesh and blood. It's no longer incarnate. Have we become so comfortable in our beliefs that we have stopped setting out to encounter God, and instead conform God to my life where I am, rather than conform myself to God and setting out to find Him where He is? Nothing proclaims that Christmas is about Jesus Christ more than waking up and coming to the church at midnight. We all talk about that. Where is Christ? Keep Christ in Christmas. Are we doing that faithfully as Catholics? Or is He just a prelude to the movies and the dinner and the celebration and gifts? The culture only drops Christ when we first drop Christ. Faith is an invitation to a journey, to set out. And if we refuse to set out, we lose the faith. It's that real and it's that dangerous. Doesn't happen instantly, not all at one time, but it's little by little, drop by drop, until one day you're shutting down churches all over, shutting down schools, and you find yourself looking around at Mass one day saying, where did everybody go? It's a good question. When we stop allowing our faith to cause us to be uncomfortable, illogical, and inconvenienced, it atrophies. It's the greatest danger in life. And that's why Fulton Sheen said so prophetically of our times, the reason people leave Christianity, and so many have left it today, is not because it is too hard. It is because it has become too soft. The greatest danger to our faith is not poverty and trials and sufferings. No, it's riches, it's abundance, it's security and affluence. That's when our own victory defeats us. Our prosperity impoverishes us, and our contentment condemns us. We stop setting out, become comfortable where we're at and with what we got. And the faith is relegated to a mere theory in the mind, because only a love affair expresses itself in the body, in flesh and blood. A man once said, all of my ideas are bloody ideas. What he meant by that was, everything that I believe, you will see it in my flesh. It's incarnate. I live it. And the way our ideas about God, about our faith, what we believe, the way they become bloody is by allowing ourselves to set out to be uncomfortable so that it becomes real in our flesh. That's when it passes from the mind to a reality. We feel it. Every idea of God about us is a bloody idea. The birth of Christ in a cave in the middle of the night was bloody. The incarnation in the womb of the Blessed Virgin Mary was bloody. Our redemption on the cross was bloody. All God's ideas are bloody ideas, because to him, his relationship with you is not a theory. It's a love affair. That's why the Eucharist isn't an idea. It's not a symbol. It's not a nice thought. No, it's flesh and blood. Because love affairs must be expressed in flesh and blood. This isn't just about what Mass we choose to go to this Christmas. It's much deeper than that. It's being honest with ourselves and asking ourselves the question, has my faith, has my relationship with God become more of a theory and less of a love affair? At what point did I stop setting out, willing to be uncomfortable in order to encounter God? Only those who are willing to set out will truly find the God who sets out to meet them. Not in a place of luxury, not in the convenience of the early afternoon, and not in an inn or in a hospital, but in a cold, dark, barren cave in the middle of the night. Not because it makes sense in the mind, but because it's there in the cave in the middle of the night, where it becomes sensed in our body. We feel it. That's where our ideas about God become bloody. That's where our faith becomes a love affair. And that's where we truly encounter Jesus Christ, God in the flesh, if we are willing to set out to meet him.